The Silver Fortress. A werewolf shifter romance audiobook. Keep your head down, the guard muttered, his armor clanking as they climbed the tower stairs. Each step echoed against stone walls that seemed to swallow sound and light equally. Don't speak unless the commander asks you a direct question. Mira's calves burned from the endless ascent. The fortress stretched above her, impossibly tall, its silver spires piercing storm clouds that never seemed to break. And whatever you do, the guard continued, his voice dropping, don't mention the war. He lost his entire unit. Doesn't talk about it. So I should, Mira began. You should be silent, he snapped. Though honestly, I'd advise you to turn around now. You're too soft for this. He'll break you by morning. Mira's jaw tightened. I'm stronger than I look. The guard snorted. That's what the last three said. One lasted 2 hours. Another made it to sunset before she ran screaming. The third. He shook his head. We found her crying in the stables. Heat crept up Mira's neck. She wasn't here by choice. Her uncle's words still rang in her ears. The commander needs a new attendant. You'll serve him personally. Don't shame our house. The way he'd said it, the calculating gleam in his eyes, Mira understood now what he'd meant. What he expected to happen. Noble families didn't just send their wards to serve war heroes out of patriotic duty. They sent them with other expectations. Her stomach churned. Gods. They'd sent her to become his mistress, hadn't they? She'd already spent 5 years as an unpaid servant in her uncle's house after her parents died, raising his children while he spent her inheritance. Now he'd given her away like a token to be used and discarded. We're here, the guard said, stopping before a reinforced iron door. Through the narrow window, Mira could see a spacious chamber lit by cold blue mage light. Maps covered every wall. A desk overflowed with reports and tactical diagrams. The girl is here, Commander, the guard announced. Silence. Then a voice from within, rough as gravel. Send her away. The guard shot Mira and I told you so, look, and reached for her arm. But something made Mira plant her feet. She'd come this far. She was tired of being discarded. Commander, she called through the door, her voice steadier than she felt. My name is Mira Ashwood. My uncle sent me. If you want me gone, you'll have to tell me yourself. More silence. Then, fine. Let her in. She can hear it face to face. The guard unlocked the door with obvious reluctance. It swung open with a groan of old hinges. The room was colder than the stairwell. Battle maps covered every surface, walls, tables, even parts of the floor. In the far corner, barely visible in the dim light, a figure sat hunched over a desk. I'm Mira, she started. I don't care who you are, the voice cut her off. Leave. Now. But even as he spoke, Mira heard something else. A sharp intake of breath. A barely suppressed sound of pain. Every instinct screamed at her to obey, to retreat. This man was the commander of the Northern Guard, legendary for his victories, feared across 3 kingdoms. She was nobody. She stayed. I said leave, he growled, and this time there was a dangerous edge to it. Mira turned toward the door. Her hand touched the cold iron handle. Then she heard it again, that sound. Like someone trying desperately not to cry out. Her feet stopped. Her hand fell from the handle. Are you defying a direct order? The voice was closer now and angrier. Mira turned back slowly. Her eyes had adjusted to the dim light, and now she could see him properly. Commander Darius Kane sat not at a desk but in a wheeled chair, the kind used for soldiers who'd lost the use of their legs. His dark hair was longer than military regulation, falling across a face that might have been handsome if not twisted with pain and fury. His hands gripped the armrests of the chair, knuckles white. Everyone knew Commander Kane. The war hero. The tactical genius. The man who'd led the defense of the Northern Pass against impossible odds. Nobody had mentioned he couldn't walk. Mira stared, unable to hide her shock. His expression turned to ice. Get out. But she'd already seen what she wasn't supposed to see. The mighty commander, the monster everyone whispered about, trapped in a chair, struggling with pain he couldn't hide. I'm sorry, Mira whispered. I didn't know. You didn't know what? His voice could have cut steel. That I'm a cripple? That the great Commander Kane is useless now? There. You've seen it. Now leave before I have you thrown out. The door slammed behind her as guards pulled her back into the stairwell. But as Mira descended those endless stairs, her heart wouldn't stop pounding. Because in that moment when their eyes met, something inside her had stirred. Something primal and undeniable. And from the way his pupils had dilated, the way his breath had caught, he'd felt it too. Chapter 2. 3 days had passed and Mira was still here. That fact seemed to surprise everyone, including herself. The commander hadn't made her his mistress. In fact, he barely looked at her. He watched her like a hawk studying potential prey, suspicious, calculating, waiting for her to make a wrong move. She'd been relegated to cleaning duty, which the other servants called a miracle. Most attendants were dismissed within hours. One girl had lasted exactly 15 minutes before fleeing in tears, claiming the commander had stared at her until she couldn't breathe. But Mira had lasted 3 days. She moved through his war room now, dusting shelves with careful precision. Every map had to be touched with cloth gloves. He'd shouted at her the first day when her bare fingers left prints on a strategic diagram. The mage lights had to be dimmed to exactly half brightness. She'd learned these rules through trial and error, through the tightness that entered his jaw when something displeased him. Like right now. Are you finished yet? The commander's voice cut through the quiet. Mira jumped slightly, nearly dropping her cloth. Almost, Commander. He sat by the window in his wheeled chair, tactical reports spread across a small table. His shoulders were rigid, jaw clenched. She could see the pain hovering around him like a dark cloud, in the way he shifted position, seeking comfort he couldn't find. You've been dusting that same shelf for 10 minutes, he said sharply. Just being thorough, Commander, Mira replied, moving faster. Thorough is one thing. Glacial is another. Mira's hand sped up, her heart picking up its pace. She could feel his stare boring into her back, could sense his impatience thickening the air like humidity before a storm. My uncle used to get frustrated with me too, she heard herself say, the words escaping before she could stop them. How long does it take you to wash dishes, Mira? Why did the laundry take all afternoon, Mira? She gave a self-deprecating laugh. I'm just slow, I'm afraid. Whenever I try to hurry, I break things. Then I get nervous and break more things and… Fine, the commander interrupted. I understand. Just work in silence. Oh, absolutely, Commander. Silent as snow falling. You won't even know I'm… That wasn't silent. Mira snapped her mouth shut and nodded quickly. The room fell quiet again except for the soft whisper of cloth against wood and the occasional rustle of paper as he worked. Mira tried to focus on her task, but she couldn't help her awareness of him. Her instincts were constantly attuned to his presence. She'd never experienced anything like it, this pull toward someone, this need to know where he was in the room at all times. He had strong hands, she noticed, scarred and calloused from years of sword work, but the fingers were elegant as they moved across the parchment with practiced precision. What? He snapped suddenly, not looking up. Mira froze. Heat flooded her face. When he turned toward her, visibly annoyed, she blurted, Nothing. I was just thinking you have very capable hands. I mean, not that they're too capable or anything strange. They're perfectly normal hands. Good hands. The right amount of handness. The commander stared at her for a long moment. Then he sighed, a long weary sound that seemed to come from his bones, and returned to his paperwork. Mira bit her lip hard and went back to dusting with renewed determination. She would not speak again. She would not look at him again. She would be invisible. But she couldn't help noticing the tension in his frame, the exhaustion in every line of his body. It must be awful, she thought, to have been a warrior and now be confined to a chair. To have led armies and now struggle with simple movement. No wonder he was harsh. Why were you doing your uncle's laundry? He asked suddenly. The question came without warning, his voice cutting through her thoughts. He still wasn't looking at her. Mira paused, surprised. Commander? You said your uncle got frustrated with you doing chores? The commander pressed, his tone sharp with impatience. Doesn't House Ashwood have servants? He'd remembered. She'd mentioned her house only once, that first day when he demanded to know her lineage. They do have servants, Commander, Mira said carefully. But after my parents died and I went to live with my uncle, he decided I should help with household tasks. Help, the commander repeated, his voice flat. With tasks. Yes, Commander. His head snapped up fully and his expression was furious. The temperature in the room seemed to plummet. I don't like liars, he said, each word precise and cold as ice. Mira went very still. Her instincts screamed at her to lower her eyes, to apologize, to submit. But she wasn't lying. She hadn't lied. Still, she knew better than to argue with an angry commander. Her uncle's household had taught her well. When someone more powerful was angry, you stayed calm and waited for the storm to pass. You will tell me everything, the commander continued, his voice hard. Answer all my questions truthfully always. Is that understood? Mira nodded slowly, keeping her expression neutral. Yes, Commander. He stared at her, his steel-gray eyes searching her face for defiance or fear. But Mira held his gaze steadily. She had nothing to hide. House Ashwood is wealthy, he said. Yet you claim they needed you to do servants' work. Now Mira understood. He thought she was being evasive, making excuses. Yes, Commander, she said calmly. They're wealthy. They didn't need me to work. But after my uncle became my guardian, his wife decided I should earn my keep. She said charity was wasted on orphans who contributed nothing. The commander's eyes narrowed. Explain. She swallowed and told him. Not everything, she couldn't bear to lay out every humiliation, but enough. How her aunt had gradually transformed her from ward to unpaid servant. How her cousins had delighted in ordering her around. How her uncle had grown distant, too weak or too indifferent to intervene. How they'd spent her inheritance on luxuries while she scrubbed their floors. The commander listened in silence. When she finished, something flashed across his face, almost like shame, as if he regretted asking. But the softness lasted only a moment. The eastern window locks, he said sharply, his gaze sweeping the room. You only checked them twice. Check all 3 locks again. Properly this time. Mira bit back a sigh. She checked all 3 locks. She was certain. But she crossed to the window and tested each mechanism carefully, one by one, while he watched. 3 times, Commander, she confirmed quietly. I saw you only do it twice. I checked them earlier, Commander, before you arrived in the room. Are you arguing with me? No, Commander. Mira unlocked and relocked each mechanism 3 times, slowly, deliberately, while he watched. When she finished, she turned back to him with carefully maintained calm. Is there anything else you need before I go, Commander? He looked surprised by the question, as though unused to anyone offering rather than fleeing at the first opportunity. For a long moment, he simply stared at her, something unreadable moving behind those gray eyes. Then quietly, I apologize. For calling you a liar. Mira blinked, genuinely shocked. Thank you, Commander. She curtsied, careful and proper, the way her mother had taught her years ago, and left quietly, her heart pounding the entire way down the tower stairs. Chapter 3. Commander Darius Kane didn't enjoy the way Mira Ashwood lingered in his mind. He pressed his palms against his tired eyes, trying to scrub away the memory. But it persisted, the softness in her voice when she told him about her family. The way she'd looked at him not with pity or fear, but with something gentler. Understanding, maybe. Enough, he muttered to the empty room. He needed to move. Sitting still made his nerves crawl, made the restlessness in his bones unbearable. The chair was a prison of its own kind. So he stood. His legs took his weight easily as he crossed the room in long, powerful strides. The floorboards creaked beneath his boots, a sound he'd learned to hate because it meant someone might hear. Might discover his secret. He wasn't actually trapped in the wheeled chair. Not anymore. His legs had healed months ago. But he needed people to think he was still broken. Needed them to underestimate him while he hunted for the truth about what had really happened at the Northern Pass. About who had betrayed his unit to the enemy. He paced the length of his war room, each step releasing the tension coiled in his muscles. No one is that genuine, he said bitterly to the shadows. Not after experiencing loss. His jaw clenched. He resumed pacing with renewed vigor, his mind spinning through possibilities. Someone had sent Mira here. House Ashwood had political ambitions. This could be part of a larger plot. I will learn her game, he told himself. She cannot be real. A knock sounded at the door. Darius threw himself toward the chair, landing in it just as the door opened. He was breathless, wild-eyed, his heart hammering. But it was only Captain Lisa. Relief crashed through him even as his hands gripped the armrests. His second-in-command raised an eyebrow at his harassed appearance. Where have you been? He demanded. I sent for you an hour ago. Lisa crossed the room with her usual efficiency, placing a hand on his shoulder. I'm sorry, Commander. I came as soon as I received your message. He grasped her hand, pressed it briefly to his forehead. The familiar gesture steadied him. Lisa had been with him since the beginning, had survived the Northern Pass by his side. She was one of the few people he trusted. There are enemies everywhere, Lisa, he said, releasing a shaky breath. I need eyes on everything. She ran a comforting hand through his hair, too long for regulation, but he couldn't bring himself to care. We've been through this. Your enemy died at the pass. You killed him yourself. You must stop this. He wanted to believe her. Gods, how he wanted to believe her. But the doubt gnawed at him, relentless. The feeling that he was missing something vital. Have you been losing time again? She asked gently. He jerked away from her touch, wheeling backward. The new attendant. What do we know about her? Why is House Ashwood really sending her here? You mean Mira? Lisa blinked, clearly confused. She's a ward they wanted to place in a position of honor. Standard political maneuvering. Darius waved a hand impatiently. What do they gain by placing her with me specifically? Lisa's expression softened into something unbearably sympathetic. Your favor, Darius. You're a war hero. Houses want to be associated with you. That's all. Darius wheeled himself to the window. His fortress spread out below him, torches flickering in the evening darkness. Hundreds of soldiers depending on him to keep them safe. To see threats before they materialized. I don't trust her, he said quietly. Lisa scoffed. She's more mouse than wolf. Darius sent a glare over his shoulder sharp enough to cut. Lisa had the good sense to straighten. What would you have me do, Commander? Darius visibly flinched at the formal address from his closest friend, but he recognized it for what it was, confirmation that she would help him. Nothing elaborate, he said carefully. I don't want to spook her. If she's part of a wider conspiracy, I need to draw it out slowly. His voice hardened with resolve. They won't escape this time, Lisa. Not again. Lisa's mouth twisted, but she said nothing more. With a sharp salute, she left him to his thoughts. Chapter 4. Mira had discovered that the fortress kitchens were her favorite place in the entire compound. They were warm, always smelling of fresh bread and roasted herbs, and the head cook, a gruff woman named Sergeant Kell, had actually spoken to her this morning without scowling. That felt like progress. She stood at the preparation counter, carefully arranging ingredients for the commander's breakfast. Honey, cinnamon, dried fruit. The porridge had to be prepared in a specific order. 3 clockwise stirs of honey, she murmured to herself. 1 counterclockwise pour of cream. 2 pinches of cinnamon distributed evenly across the top. Kell glanced over from her bread dough. All that fuss for porridge? The commander is particular, Mira said, reaching for the honey pot. I noticed he barely touched it the first morning when I didn't follow the exact pattern. Yesterday I got it right and he finished the entire bowl. Kell's eyebrows rose. That why you've lasted longer than the others, I suppose? Mira smiled as she worked, making deliberate clockwise circles with the honey, the careful counterclockwise pour of cream, the even distribution of cinnamon. Every movement was intentional. This was what the commander required. You know, a voice said beside her, he really can't tell which direction you stir the honey. Captain Lisa stood at the counter, her appearance sudden and silent. She wore an easy smile, but something calculating lurked behind her pale eyes. The only thing that actually matters is the cinnamon, Lisa continued. These little details, they're excessive. You could save yourself considerable time. Mira looked at the perfectly prepared porridge. This is what he asked for, Captain. I don't mind. But he'll never know if you skip the fussy bits. Lisa's tone turned conspiratorial. You could simplify. Make your life easier. Perhaps, Mira said carefully. But he asked for it this way. Lisa watched as Mira reached for the small tasting spoon. Another requirement, she was to taste every dish before serving. What are you doing? Lisa's tone sharpened. Testing it, Captain. The commander asked me to taste his food. Mira. Lisa straightened, urgency entering her voice. You don't need to do that. It's paranoid and excessive. Honestly, it's insulting to Sergeant Kell and her staff. Mira hesitated. Was it excessive? Kell hadn't seemed offended when the commander had given the instruction, and he'd been very clear about this rule. I'll cover for you, Lisa pressed. I'll tell him I instructed you not to waste time. He won't question me. It would be easy to listen. To skip this step, save time, avoid awkwardness. But the commander's voice echoed in her memory. You will follow my instructions. Always. I appreciate the offer, Captain, Mira said quietly. But the commander gave me specific orders. If he wanted me to skip the tasting, he would tell me himself. Mira really? But Mira had already dipped the spoon and brought it to her lips. The porridge was warm, perfectly balanced between sweet and savory. It's good, she said. I should get this to him before it cools. Lisa said nothing as Mira left, but she could feel the captain's eyes boring into her back the entire way. The commander accepted the breakfast without comment. No criticism meant she'd done it right. When Mira returned to the kitchens, she found them empty except for Lisa, who sat at the wooden prep table, staring at nothing. He wasn't always like this, Lisa said without looking up. Mira paused. The words felt weighted, important. Lisa lifted her gaze. I should explain myself. What just happened, when I urged you not to taste his food, it was a test of your loyalty to him. A test. She'd been tested without knowing it. You passed though, Lisa continued, and something like relief crossed her features. And I'm glad you did. Mira sat down across from her, mind reeling. Why did he need to test me? Lisa's chest rose with a heavy breath. Because he's consumed by suspicion, she said. 6 months ago, Darius was betrayed by his own lieutenant, a man named Marcus Thorne. They'd served together for years, closer than brothers. And Marcus tried to kill him for a promotion to general. Mira's hand flew to her mouth. That's awful. Marcus delivered the poisoned wine himself, Lisa said, her voice tight. At the last second, couldn't go through with it. Knocked the glass away, saved Darius's life. But the damage was done. The poison had already started working. It paralyzed him, left him in that chair. Lisa's hands clenched into fists. Marcus confessed. Said he wanted the glory, the advancement. He was executed for treason. Gods, Mira breathed. But Darius can't accept it. Lisa leaned forward. He's convinced Marcus was working with someone else. That there's a larger conspiracy. That the real enemy is still out there plotting. She paused. So now he tests everyone. Servants, soldiers, even me sometimes. Her expression turned pained. The trauma has made him see plots everywhere, even where there are none. Mira's heart twisted. Not cruelty, fear. Fear born from devastating betrayal. I understand why you tested me, Mira said softly. You can trust me. I promise. Lisa's expression softened with what looked like genuine relief. I believe you. That's why you passed. After Lisa left, Mira remained at the table, her thoughts churning. The commander hadn't always been this way. He'd been betrayed by someone he trusted completely, left paralyzed, surrounded by people he couldn't trust. Of course he was harsh. Of course he tested everyone. Lisa seemed worried about his paranoia, but all Mira felt was compassion. She knew what it felt like to be betrayed by people who were supposed to protect you. He needed patience. Loyalty that didn't waver. Someone who wouldn't give up on him. Mira stood, straightening her apron with quiet resolve. She would be that person. Not because she pitied him, but because she understood what it meant to be hurt by those you trusted. Chapter 5. Mira hummed as she organized the tactical maps in the commander's war room. Afternoon sunlight streamed through the tall windows, painting everything gold. This place, this work, it was good. The commander sat at his desk, reports spread before him. He kept glancing at her, his expression shifting between annoyance and something softer she couldn't quite name. Then she started singing, a folk song her mother used to sing while baking. Must you make that noise? Darius snapped. Mira startled, nearly dropping the map she was rolling. So sorry, Commander. I find it helps me concentrate. You know when you have a repetitive task and your mind just sort of drifts? Organizing is like that for me. She trailed off, realizing she was rambling again. Not that you would know about organizing maps yourself, she added quickly, then winced. I mean, you do organize them. Obviously. You're very organized. Extremely organized. The most organized person I've ever. Heat flooded her face. She fiddled with the map ties and several metal pins clattered to the floor. Actually, I can picture you organizing maps quite well, she continued, unable to stop herself. You'd probably do it much faster than me. More efficiently. With better. She caught the tiniest twitch at the corner of his mouth. Ha. Mira's eyes widened. Was that almost a smile? It was not, Darius said, his face instantly serious again. But Mira felt triumphant. She'd cracked his stern exterior, even if just for a moment. She was about to tell him exactly that when her foot caught on the edge of the rug. She stumbled forward, knocking a stack of reports from his desk. Papers scattered everywhere. Oh no, I'm so sorry. Mira dropped to her knees, frantically gathering them. Don't read those, Darius's voice was sharp, paranoia flaring. Mira dropped the papers immediately, eyes downcast. Of course, Commander. You needn't worry. Her voice came out small. I can't read anyway. Darius stared at her, mistrust radiating from him. But shame radiated from her, hunched shoulders, downcast eyes, the flush of humiliation on her cheeks. My uncle didn't find me important enough to invest in my education, she said quietly, showing her empty palms in a gesture of helplessness. The simple honesty made something in his chest twist. He believed her. His shoulders relaxed slightly. An education is one's greatest weapon, he said, his voice less harsh. Mira sighed, gesturing to herself. Alas, I am unarmed. Darius moved forward in his wheeled chair, hooking a finger under her chin and lifting her gaze to his. The touch sent electricity through her skin. "Then I will teach you," he said. Chapter 6. The fortress library became Mira's favorite place. She met Darius there every evening, and at first the lessons were stilted, awkward. But slowly she began to improve. Letters became words. Words became sentences. Sentences became stories. Tonight she approached their usual table with a stack of books she'd selected. Beautiful ones with embossed leather covers and gold lettering she was learning to decipher. As she neared the table, her foot caught on her skirt hem. She went down hard, books cascading around her like falling leaves. "Not again," she groaned. Darius wheeled to her side, and she could have sworn she heard him trying not to laugh. An actual laugh, warm and real. "Are you injured?" he asked. Mira stared at the scattered books, mortified. All the books. The beautiful books. She gathered them like precious artifacts. "I'm so sorry. I'll pay for any damage." "Never mind the books," Darius said, and his voice was gentler than she'd ever heard it. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head. "Just my pride." Darius picked up one near his wheel, a deep blue tome, and frowned at the spine. "This is a book on military logistics." Mira turned completely red. Darius stared at her. Then, for the first time since she'd known him, he laughed. Deep from his chest, so unexpected and genuine that Mira started laughing with him. The sound echoed through the library, bright and free. Autumn arrived, painting the valley below the fortress in shades of amber and crimson. Mira had settled into a comfortable rhythm with the commander. She knew when he wanted silence, when he'd tolerate her chatter, when her humming soothed the pain that still plagued him. One afternoon, she organized supply reports while he worked on correspondence. Without thinking, she began to hum. She caught herself and turned sharply. "Sorry, Commander." He glanced up, his voice gruff. "It's all right. Your voice isn't entirely unpleasant." Mira suppressed a grin. Coming from him, that was poetry. She turned back, singing quietly. When he didn't object, her voice grew stronger, filling the war room with melody. The library sessions continued as the days grew shorter and colder. Mira's reading improved dramatically. She found herself looking forward to their evenings together more than she should, anticipating the moment when the dinner bell rang and she could make her way to the library. Late one night, they read a children's story about a young soldier who saved her kingdom through cleverness rather than strength. Mira was acutely aware of how close they sat, the warmth between them despite the cold room. Her mind wandered to his hands, scarred from battle, but with long elegant fingers that turned pages with surprising gentleness. Her cheeks heated. "You were doing so well," Darius said, misreading her blush. "Keep going." She read on, finishing with only 2 stumbles. When she reached the end, she turned to him with pride. He smiled, but sadness lurked behind the expression. "Are you all right?" Mira asked gently. He stared at the illustration on the final page, a young soldier embracing her family after the war. His fingers traced the drawing. Finally he spoke. "It was Marcus's favorite when we were boys," he said, his voice quiet and distant. "He always believed that good would triumph. That loyalty and honor mattered above all." He shook his head, something breaking in his expression. "I wonder what he would think now." Mira's heart ached. Her hand trembled as she laid it on his arm. "Thank you for sharing that with me," she whispered. Their eyes met. The air shifted, charged with something new and terrifying and wonderful. Her breath caught. His gaze dropped to her lips for just a fraction of a second. Just as she thought he might kiss her, he turned back to the book. Chapter 7. The leaves turned crimson, then began to fall in earnest. Mira had been at the fortress over 2 months now. The other servants had stopped looking at her like she was a ghost, someone who would vanish any day now like all the others. One afternoon, Darius was bent over his desk, writing frantically. She sang a cheerful harvest song as she worked, organizing the previous week's patrol reports. Then she paused, glancing over her shoulder. Darius was absorbed in his work, not paying her any notice. But he was humming along quietly under his breath, his deep voice harmonizing unconsciously with her melody. Mira's heart soared. She continued with her tasks, picking up where she'd left off in the song. Darius remained none the wiser, still humming along. She smiled so wide her cheeks hurt. The first frost came with biting cold that turned the fortress windows to ice. The compound grew darker earlier, and Mira worried about the commander working too late, pushing himself past exhaustion. She'd taken to bringing him tea most nights. Tonight the fortress was quiet when she knocked on his door with her usual 3 sharp raps. "Come in." He was working by lamplight, dark circles shadowing his eyes. Reports were stacked dangerously high on every surface. "I thought you might like some tea," Mira said softly. When Darius smiled, really smiled, his eyes crinkled at the corners. He moved papers aside for her to set down the cup. He held up a report showing her. She read it aloud slowly, stumbling only once on an unfamiliar place name. "It's a village on the eastern border," Darius explained patiently. "Their grain stores were damaged in a flood. I'm sending emergency supplies to help them through winter." Mira studied his profile in the lamplight. His strong jaw, the way his expression softened when he spoke of the people under his protection. Over these months, she'd watched him work himself to exhaustion for those he commanded. She'd seen him make agonizing decisions, heard him worry about families he'd never met but felt responsible for. She'd glimpsed who he really was beneath the harsh exterior. Someone who cared so deeply it hurt. Someone who carried the weight of hundreds of lives and refused to let anyone suffer if he could prevent it. Her heartbeat pounded loud in the quiet room. She realized with startling clarity that somewhere in these months of lessons and laughter, of songs and small kindnesses, she'd fallen completely in love with him. Chapter 8. It felt like history repeating itself. Darius paced his private chamber, running both hands through his hair. He looked disheveled, distressed. His room was in disarray, bed unmade, books scattered across the floor, a half-eaten meal forgotten on the table. He'd been like this for hours, unable to settle, unable to think straight. He clutched his chest where a strange ache had taken root. The pain drove him to his knees. His eyes flashed with an unnatural silver light before returning to their natural gray. "She can't be," his voice came out rough, disbelieving. He shook his head as if arguing with something inside himself. "She can't be my soulbound." As the words left his mouth, another wave of pain seized his chest. Denying the truth of their bond caused him physical agony, his very soul rebelling against the lie. He thought about the night before. Mira bringing him tea as he worked late. The soft concern in her eyes. The gentle way she'd smiled at him when he'd explained about the village relief efforts. Her thoughtfulness warmed something in him he'd thought frozen beyond repair. Rising unsteadily to his feet, he crossed to the window and looked out at his fortress spread below. Torches flickered in the darkness. Hundreds of soldiers depending on him to keep them safe. "She's so kind," he said to the empty room. But someone so full of kindness can be easily manipulated. An old memory surfaced unbidden. Him and Marcus working late into the night, planning defensive positions for the northern pass. The work had been serious, life and death. But Marcus had always been able to make him smile, always lighten the burden with a joke or an encouraging word. The memory shifted, morphing into something that hadn't happened yet. A vision of the future. Instead of Marcus by his side, Mira was there. Not as his attendant but as his partner. His soulbound. They were walking through the fortress together and soldiers smiled at them, at her. She was beloved by everyone. Of course she was. She would soften his harsh image, balance his severity with her gentle warmth. He saw them visiting the eastern villages together. A child in Mira's arms, their child. A feral growl tore from his throat, shattering the vision. Because the fantasy twisted so easily into something darker. Mira in the war room, his command seal on her finger, a bloody knife in her hand. His body at her feet. Just like Marcus had planned. "That isn't Mira," he said violently, shaking his head. "That isn't her." But how could he be sure? How could he ever be certain? Darius sank onto his bed and stared up at the ceiling. His future felt like it stood at a crossroads. One path led to Mira, to warmth and laughter, to someone who saw him, truly saw him. Who didn't flinch from his scars or his suspicion. The other path stretched out alone into darkness. And he knew with a certainty that terrified him that if he didn't choose her, he would be alone forever. His soul would accept no other bond. But the risk. God's the risk. He closed his eyes, exhaustion finally catching up to him. "One more test," he whispered to the empty room. "Just one more." Chapter 9. It was late, the fortress wrapped in the deep quiet of night. Mira knocked on the war room door, cup of tea in hand. It had become their ritual, a small comfort they both looked forward to. But tonight there was no answer. She chewed her bottom lip, uncertain. She always waited for permission to enter. But concern pierced through her hesitation. What if something had happened? What if his old injury was causing him pain? Ever so slowly she opened the door and peeked inside. Relief flooded through her when she saw Darius dozing by the dying fire, his head tilted back, a blanket draped across his lap. He worked so hard, pushed himself beyond reasonable limits. Of course he'd fallen asleep at his desk. Mira entered quietly, her footsteps soft on the stone floor. As she neared, she took in his profile, strong features finally relaxed in sleep, tension gone from his jaw for once. She could see a gentleness in him now that hadn't been there months ago. Or perhaps it had always been there, just hidden behind layers of protection. Something stirred in her chest, and for just a moment she felt a strange pull, like an invisible thread connecting her heart to his. Soulbound, something whispered inside her. The word should have frightened her. Too soon, too fast, too much. But Mira had learned patience. She would wait as long as he needed. Gently, she placed the teacup beside him. His dinner plate sat there too, and she reached to tidy it away. Then she faltered. A beautiful silver pocket watch lay on the table, catching the firelight. Gorgeous, clearly an heirloom, probably worth more than everything she owned combined. She glanced at Darius, still sleeping peacefully. Had he been lost in memories tonight? Looking at keepsakes from before the betrayal? Her eyes filled with tears. She just wanted him to be happy. To find peace. She brushed away the tears and stacked the used dishes carefully, making sure not to disturb the pocket watch. With the table tidied, Mira turned to leave. But she paused. His blanket was slipping off his lap. Her heart thundered. She set down the plates and edged nearer. The closer she got, the more her blood heated, the more she longed to touch him. Her fingers trembled as she lifted the blanket to his shoulders. Leaning over him, she paused. This close, she could see the faint scars on his hands, evidence of countless battles. The exhaustion etched into his features even in sleep. "You're so strong, Darius," Mira whispered, the fire crackling softly. "You've kept going despite everything. Protected so many people. It's one of the things that makes you a great commander." Her voice hitched, growing quieter. "It's one of the reasons why I'm falling in love with you." Tenderly, she stroked his fingers where they rested on the chair arm. "Will not," she said softly, correcting herself. "You're the strongest man I've ever known." When she went to withdraw, Darius's hand shot out and caught her wrist. His eyes opened, fully awake, fully alert. "You love me?" Viola's heart stopped. Mortification crashed over her like a wave of ice water. "Commander, I thought you were asleep." "You love me?" Darius repeated, his grip tightening slightly. Insistent. "I shouldn't have said it. It was inappropriate." Mira tried to pull away, desperate to flee. In her haste, counterbalanced by him still holding her wrist, she stumbled and landed in his lap. "Mira," Darius said firmly. "Look at me." She forced herself to meet his gaze, her face burning. "Did you mean it?" he asked quietly. She could lie. Laugh it off as exhaustion or too much wine at dinner. But as she looked into his gray eyes, she found she couldn't. "Yes," Mira whispered. "Why?" Darius asked, and the question came out almost helpless. "I've been nothing but harsh to you. Suspicious. Demanding." "Because I know you," Mira interrupted, finding her courage. "I know how much you care about your people. How hard you work. How lonely you are." Her voice softened. "How brave you are every single day, choosing to keep going despite everything that happened to you." Darius stared at her, something cracking in his carefully maintained expression. "You don't have to say anything," Mira said quickly. "I know it's too soon. I know you might not." "I love you too," Darius said. The words hung between them. Mira's breath caught. Darius's free hand cupped her face, his thumb brushing her cheekbone with devastating gentleness. "I love you too, Mira. I've been telling myself it was too fast, too dangerous, that I couldn't trust it." His gray eyes held hers, vulnerable in a way she'd never seen. "But my soul has known for weeks. You're my soulbound." Tears spilled down Mira's cheeks. "Your soulbound?" "My soulbound," Darius confirmed, resting his forehead against hers. They stayed like that, eyes closed, breathing each other's air. The world narrowed to just this moment, this connection. When he pulled back, his voice trembled slightly. "Marry me." An elated laugh escaped Mira, pure joy bubbling up despite her tears. Darius made a sound between a growl and a laugh. "You're laughing at me?" "Only because I'm so happy I don't know what else to do," Mira said, beaming through her tears. A genuine grin spread across Darius's face, the first real smile she'd ever seen from him, unguarded and beautiful. "Is that a yes?" he asked. "Of course it is," Mira breathed. He kissed her then. Softly at first, almost reverently. But when she responded, winding her arms around his neck, the kiss deepened. Contentment settled over her like a warm blanket. This was what she'd dreamed of, being held, being loved, being chosen. But even as she breathed in his scent, wood smoke and steel and something uniquely him, a small voice whispered in the back of her mind. This is so fast. She loved him. She knew that with absolute certainty. But was 2 months enough time? Did he truly love her? Or was he clinging to one of the few people he felt he could trust? He said you're his soulbound, she reminded herself. That's not something you can fake. But the doubt remained, small but persistent. She pushed it down, willing herself to simply feel the moment. Everything would be all right. It had to be. Chapter 10. Darius found himself smiling in the fortress kitchens as Sergeant Kell presented him with a small basket of delicacies. He examined one of the pastries and took a bite. It's excellent, he praised. Mira will love it. The cook smiled warmly and continued packing parcels of food into a larger basket. Darius watched, eager to show Mira how much last night had meant to him. He'd tested her before, leaving valuables around while pretending to sleep. But she'd simply adjusted his blanket and confessed her love, thinking him unconscious. She'd passed every test without even knowing they were tests. And now it was time to let go of old fears and finally be happy with the woman he loved. Commander. Captain Lisa entered the kitchen, offering her hand with a smile. I hear congratulations are in order. Darius clasped her hand briefly. I never thought it was possible to trust again after Marcus, he said. But Mira changed that. Lisa's attention drifted to the growing pile of food. She does seem perfect, doesn't she? She said, her smile careful. Darius bristled. Why was she looking at him like something was wrong? Like there was something he should have seen by now? Some of his good mood faded. What is it? He snapped. Lisa hesitated. I just don't want to see you hurt when she's disappointed, she said carefully. Disappointed? Darius asked, crossing his arms. It's just. Mira's happy now, Lisa bit her lip. But how will she feel in a month? A year? When she realizes the full extent of your limitations. When she truly understands what being soulbound to a paralyzed commander means for her future. Darius gritted his teeth. She's always known me in this chair, Lisa. She doesn't mind it. Now, Lisa said gently. But forever is a long time. We have our whole lives to figure it out. We're thinking of a spring wedding. Lisa gave a dry laugh. Well, she certainly hasn't wasted any time securing her future. Darius narrowed his eyes. What do you mean by that? Lisa walked around the kitchen table, examining the basket contents. All traces of Darius's good humor vanished. Nothing at all, Commander, she said. It's only happened so quickly, that's all. I'm happy you've dropped this business about her being some political pawn. House Ashwood clearly has nothing to gain. She paused, her voice dropping. Nor is she trying to claim revenge, I don't think. Darius felt his chest tighten. Revenge? Lisa shrugged, too casual. It was terrible the way her family treated her, wasn't it? Cast aside like refuse. As your soulbound, she'll have real power, the authority to enact revenge, to do anything she likes to them. One might do almost anything to get that kind of leverage. Even marry someone they didn't truly love. Lisa glanced at Darius, who had lost the ability to breathe. Oh, but not your Mira, Lisa added quickly. I'm sure it has nothing to do with that. She shook her head. It seems Marcus's betrayal affected me more than I thought. Silly of me. Someone as genuine as Mira would never harbor such an agenda. Lisa moved toward the door. Enjoy your picnic, Commander. And with that, his second-in-command left. Darius stared at the picnic basket, frozen. Old emotions rose like a tidal wave, suspicion, fear, the terrible certainty that he was missing something vital. Would you like the basket taken to the courtyard, Commander? Kell asked. Darius's voice came out cold. I'm afraid I've lost my appetite. He examined his memories of last night. Mira's gentle confession when she thought he was sleeping. What if she'd known he was awake? What if she'd laid a careful trap? No, that was ridiculous. She'd been genuine, hadn't she? She seems perfect, Lisa's voice rang in his mind. Darius's jaw clenched. He had to know. Had to be absolutely certain before he bound himself to her forever. One more test. Just one last time. Chapter 11. Mira sat alone in her small room, brushing her hair in the mirror, lost in happy thoughts about the previous night. A knock at her door startled her from her reverie. The commander requests you in the main hall, miss, a young soldier said when she opened the door. Mira smoothed her dress and left her room with growing excitement. She hadn't seen Darius all day, had been waiting for a chance to talk about their future, about the spring wedding he'd mentioned. She entered the main hall, her eyes immediately searching for Darius in his wheeled chair. But she found only a tall figure examining a weapons display on the far wall. She was about to leave when the man turned, his voice carrying easily across the stone floor. My lady, he greeted, his tone confident and warm. Reluctantly, Mira moved fully into the hall and gave him a small curtsy. "Forgive me, sir, but I'm looking for Commander Kane." "Nonsense," the man said, striding closer with easy confidence. "My cousin can wait a few moments." He smiled, broad and brilliant, and Mira stood frozen in shock. Because that's when she noticed it. He looked exactly like Darius. The same dark hair, the same strong features, the same gray eyes. But standing tall, walking toward her with powerful, easy strides. "Cousin?" she repeated, confused. She found herself moving closer to him, examining his handsome face. "Your resemblance is uncanny." The man gave an easy laugh. "Yes, when we were younger, people confused us constantly." Then he frowned, something dark crossing his expression. "That was before, of course. Darius is much changed now." He offered his hand with a slight bow. "Allow me to introduce myself. Captain Darius Kane at your service." Mira felt an odd heat in the small space between them. When he took her hand in his, her body reacted strangely, a confused recognition, like her instincts couldn't tell the difference between this man and Darius. It made her deeply uncomfortable. "The cousin you knew is still in there," she said, pulling her hand back gently. "He's been through a lot, that's all." Captain Garrett didn't step back. Instead, he stared at her with heated intensity that made her want to flee. "Tell me," he said, his voice dropping lower. "How did he do it? How did a man in a wheelchair capture your heart? You're so beautiful, you must have had other offers." Mira flushed, this time succeeding in pulling her hand away completely. "You flatter me, sir, but that's an inappropriate question." Captain Garrett gave her no quarter, though, moving closer. Mira found herself backing up until she was pressed against the cold stone wall. She hated that her body reacted to his proximity, some confused part of her responding to his similarity to Darius. Like her own instincts were betraying her. Garrett leaned in close and the feeling grew worse. "He's half a man, my lady," he whispered near her ear. "He can't give you what you need. Not the way you deserve." Mira gasped, stunned into silence. "Let me give that to you," Garrett added, his hand moving to cup her cheek. Disgust and fury flooded through Mira. She shoved Garrett away with all her strength. "How dare you assume what I need?" Mira said, her voice shaking with anger. "The commander is twice, no, 3 times the man you are. His chair doesn't make him less of anything, but your cruelty makes you less of one." She was so angry she was trembling. And then Garrett's features began to shift. The face remained the same, but something in the posture changed. The expression. The way he held himself. "Mira," he said, reaching for her with a completely different energy. "Wait. Get out." Mira screamed, pointing to the door. "Get away from me." The man held up his palms. "Mira," he said, and now his voice was different, softer, more familiar. "It's me, Darius. Forgive me, but I had to be sure." So many emotions crashed through Mira's mind and heart. She was breathless, barely able to comprehend what had just happened. "Darius?" she asked, searching his face with new eyes. Then looking down she added, "You can walk." Darius tried to move toward her, but she kept backing away, her hand held up to stop him. "I couldn't trust anyone," he said desperately. "But you've proven yourself again and again." "You passed, Mira?" Mira went very still. A cold shiver ran down her spine. "I passed," she repeated, her voice hollow. Darius stumbled over his words. "I was already convinced of your loyalty. The breakfast test, leaving the watch out while I pretended to sleep, you passed all of those." Mira's world felt like it was crumbling beneath her feet. She listened in stunned silence as he went on. "But then Lisa mentioned your family and my limitations, and I thought perhaps she had a point. One final test to be absolutely certain." "Enough," Mira cried. "When will it be enough?" Her voice broke. "You tried to seduce me. Would you have gone through with it? Would you have violated my honor to prove a point, knowing that my soul recognizes yours?" Darius looked devastated. "No, that wasn't, Mira, it wasn't like that. I just needed to know you truly loved me." She could barely speak, so crushed by the betrayal that words felt impossible. "If you doubted it, then you should have talked to me, Darius," she said, tears streaming down her face. "We could have overcome your doubts together. But instead you chose to trick me. To test me like I was some enemy soldier." Mira shook her head. "I can't marry someone who will test me forever. I deserve someone who believes in me." Darius reached for her again, desperation crossing his features. "Mira, please." But Mira evaded him. She fled the hall, her vision blurred with tears, her heart broken into pieces. Chapter 12. Mira lay on her bed, sobbing, her heart torn in two. She was in love with Darius, deeply, irrevocably in love. But she didn't know how their relationship could ever work now that the trust they'd built was shattered. How could she marry someone who would test her forever? Who would always question her motives, her loyalty, her love? A knock sounded at her door. Her heart plummeted. She wasn't ready to see Darius, couldn't face him yet. Relief flooded through her when she saw Captain Lisa standing there instead, her expression full of concern. "The commander is an idiot," Lisa declared without preamble. "I'm so sorry for what he did, Mira. These tests of his, the paranoia has consumed him." Mira squeezed Lisa's hand gratefully. "You've done nothing to apologize for. But I just don't think there's a way back from this. He'll never trust me. He'll never trust anyone." Lisa shook her head. "He doesn't trust anyone, that's true. I keep telling him enough is enough, but I can only reassure him so much." She sighed. "He was convinced you could never truly love him as he is. The wheelchair, it haunts him." Mira nodded, but something uncomfortable settled in her chest. A small discordant note. "I can't believe he set up yet another test for you," Lisa went on, her voice rising with indignation. "The audacity when all you've ever done is show him kindness and patience." Mira kept her face neutral while her mind worked. Darius had said Lisa had been the one to suggest another test, to plant doubt about Mira's motives. But now Lisa was saying it was his idea all along, that she'd been trying to talk him out of it. One of them was lying. But who? If Darius wanted to hide the truth from Mira, he wouldn't have revealed himself as Garrett at all. He could have let the test play out and she'd never have known. But if Lisa was the one lying? Mira tried to rationalize. Lisa was attempting to comfort her. That's all. Just trying to make her feel better by shifting all the blame to Darius. But a prickle of wariness ran down her spine. "I'm not sure I can stay here right now," Mira said carefully, watching Lisa's reaction. "I don't think I can handle seeing him." Lisa nodded, perhaps a bit too eagerly. "He'll never let you leave easily, that's for certain," she said. She fumbled in her coat pocket and pulled out a small vial containing tinted purple liquid. "Here, take this." Mira stared at the vial, her instincts screaming. "I have trouble sleeping sometimes," Lisa explained quickly. "This is a simple sleeping draft I use. Put it in Darius's evening tea tonight, and you'll be able to slip away without confrontation. By the time he wakes, you can be far from here." Lisa pressed the vial into Mira's palm. "I'll cover for you. Have a carriage waiting outside the gate." Mira took the vial slowly, turning it over in her hand. Her suspicions crystallized into something sharper, clearer. "Thank you, Lisa," she said, forcing warmth into her voice. "You're very kind." Lisa smiled. "For what it's worth," she said, "I'm sorry to see you go, Mira." She squeezed Mira's shoulder before leaving. Mira sat alone, examining the bottle in the lamplight. Lisa's eagerness to help her leave felt wrong. She was supposed to be fiercely loyal to Darius, his second in command, his closest friend. Yet now she was suggesting Mira drug him? And this vial? Why would Lisa conveniently carry sleeping draft in her pocket? Mira pocketed the vial, her heart beginning to race. She needed facts before making any judgments. She would take it to the fortress healer to have it analyzed. Just to be certain. Mira moved quickly through the fortress corridors, the vial heavy in her pocket. The healer's chamber was in the eastern wing, near the infirmary. She was almost there when she heard voices ahead. "You need to sleep, Commander." Lisa's voice carried down the corridor. "You're exhausted. You haven't rested properly in days." Mira stopped dead in her tracks. Darius and Lisa came into view. He was back in his wheeled chair, looking haggard and drawn. Lisa's eyes moved from Mira's face to the healer's door, then down to the vial clutched in Mira's hand. For a moment, Lisa looked truly stunned, as though she hadn't expected this at all, hadn't anticipated being caught. Then Lisa's expression shifted from shock to something cold and calculating. She pointed at the vial, her voice rising to a shriek. "Poison." Darius's head whipped toward Mira, confusion flooding his features. "What?" Mira's mind worked quickly. "Why would you assume it's poison?" she asked Lisa, her voice steady despite her pounding heart. The captain's voice turned sharp. "Are you denying it?" "I wouldn't know what it is," Mira said carefully, meeting Lisa's eyes. "Unlike you." Darius looked between them, tension radiating from his frame. "What is going on?" Lisa recovered quickly, her voice taking on an urgent, concerned tone. "Commander, I've been suspecting Mira of wanting to poison you. I've had her followed and learned that she'd been meeting with the healer in secret. Now I know why, to obtain poison." "This is absurd," Mira said, her voice rising. "We just had a fight. I was going to leave. You were? Darius's voice was quiet, pained. Mira couldn't lie to him. She met his eyes. I am. But I don't wish you dead. It's the last thing I want. Then why are you carrying poison? Lisa demanded. Because you gave it to me. Mira exploded. Darius went very still. He looked stunned, tense, like he was trying to process something impossible. Mira realized the position she was in. Lisa was his trusted second-in-command, his friend from before the betrayal, his only ally. And now Mira was accusing her of treachery. She gave it to me, I swear, Mira said desperately, turning to Darius. She told me it was a sleeping draft to help me escape without confrontation. I would never poison my own commander, Lisa said, her voice trembling with what sounded like genuine hurt. We've served together for years. He's like a brother to me. How do you even know it's poison? Mira challenged, her voice sharp. Darius's eyes narrowed slightly, a flicker of curiosity crossing his face. Lisa saw it too. Are you saying it isn't? She challenged back. I'm saying I wouldn't know, Mira said firmly. But you seem very certain. Well, you won't mind tasting it then, Lisa said, her voice turning cold and hard. It was flawed logic. Mira could see that. Lisa was desperate, trying to push her into a corner too quickly, before Darius could think it through. I think it's poison because you say it is, Mira said, turning back to Darius. She gave it to me. How would she know it's poison if she didn't give it to me herself? Darius turned slowly to Lisa, doubt creeping across his features. Lisa's face twisted. There was a pregnant pause, a suspended moment where it seemed impossible to determine what would happen. Then, with a feral scream, Lisa lunged at Mira. A knife flashed in her hand, drawn from a hidden sheath at her belt. Mira saw it approaching, frozen in shock. No! Darius roared. He launched himself from the wheeled chair, catching Lisa by the wrist mid-lunge. They crashed together against the wall. Lisa stared, shock replacing rage. You can walk, she gasped. How long have you been able to walk? The pieces were falling into place. Mira could see it happening in real time, Darius's face shifting from confusion to horror to devastating understanding. Chapter 13. Darius stood frozen, staring at his second-in-command while maintaining his grip on her wrist. It was you all along, wasn't it? His voice was barely above a whisper. You turned Marcus against me. Lisa's beautiful features twisted into something ugly. He loved me, she spat, still struggling against his grip. He loved me more than he ever respected you. Can you believe it? All those years, everyone focused on you, the brilliant commander, the war hero. But Marcus loved me more. She laughed, bitter and harsh. And you had him killed. Because he confessed to poisoning me. Darius growled. Which you pushed him to do. You encouraged him, didn't you? Why? Because it should have been me. Lisa spat, wrenching against his hold. I was the better tactician. I won half those battles you took credit for. But did I get the promotions? The glory? No. Because I'm a woman, and you're the precious Commander Kane. Her eyes blazed with years of resentment. I would have been a better leader than you. But no, you get everything just because of your name, your family connections, your precious legacy. Guards? Mira screamed. Fortress guards rushed into the corridor, pulling Lisa from Darius's grasp. She thrashed against them like a wild animal. I saved this fortress more times than you know. Lisa shouted as they restrained her. While you got the medals and the glory, I did the real work. And when I finally tried to take what should have been mine, you murdered the only man who ever saw my worth. You manipulated Marcus, Darius said, his voice hollow with grief. You used his feelings for you as a weapon. He died trying to save me from what you'd convinced him to do. Lisa gave one final wrench against the guards, her face contorted with rage and grief. Perhaps, she said, her voice dropping to something venomous. But you could have listened to me. Given me credit. Promoted me based on merit instead of politics. Instead, you made me invisible. She laughed bitterly as the guards began to drag her away. I would have been a better commander. But you'll never know that now, will you? Her screams echoed off the stone walls until they finally faded into silence. Chapter 14. 2 days later, while Lisa waited in the fortress cells to stand trial, Mira stood in the entrance courtyard, her small bag packed. A carriage waited outside the gates, horses stamping impatiently in the cold morning air. Mira, a voice called. She closed her eyes at the sound of his voice. Running footsteps echoed across the courtyard. She turned slowly. Darius stood at the top of the entrance stairs, breathing hard, standing on his own two legs openly for the first time in front of the entire fortress. "Mira, please," he said. "Wait." He looked like he hadn't slept in days. Good. Neither had she. "I'm leaving," Mira said, proud that her voice didn't shake. "I can't be here." Darius descended quickly, taking the stairs two at a time. "Please. You don't have to go." "You pretended to seduce me, Darius," Mira cut him off, her voice sharp. "You used our soul bond against me. So yes, I do have to go. How am I supposed to trust you after that?" His face crumpled. "I don't expect you to trust me," Darius said desperately. He stopped a few feet away as if afraid coming closer would make her bolt. "I destroyed that trust. I know. But please don't leave. Stay." Mira shook her head and pulled the engagement ring, a simple silver band he'd given her that first night, from her pocket. She held it out. "I can't marry someone who will test me for the rest of my life," she said, her voice breaking despite her best efforts. "I deserve better than that." Darius looked at the ring like it was a death sentence. "You deserve so much better than me," he agreed, his voice cracking. "You deserve someone who trusts you completely. Someone who would never hurt you the way I did." He took a shaky breath. "But I'm begging you. Please stay and give me a chance to become that person." He dropped to his knees right there in the courtyard, in full view of the guards and servants watching from the walls. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness," he said, his voice raw. "But I'll spend every day trying to earn it if you'll just stay. If you'll just give me one more chance." Mira stared at him kneeling before her. Part of her wanted to walk away to protect herself from more pain. But a larger part, the part that still loved him despite everything, couldn't do it. She clutched her bag tighter. "If I stay, it's as a guest for now. Nothing more. No promises. No expectations." Hope flickered across Darius's face like sunrise breaking through storm clouds. The weeks that followed were a slow dance of healing. At first, Mira barely saw Darius. He gave her true space, respecting her boundaries in a way he never had before. But then small gestures began appearing. Books left outside her door, not military logistics this time, but poetry and history she'd mentioned wanting to read. Fresh winter roses in her room each morning, despite the fact that they had to be brought up from the southern valleys at great expense. Her favorite spiced tea waiting in the library each afternoon. When they did interact, Darius asked permission before sitting beside her. He helped her read with patient gentleness, never pushing, never demanding. Then one day he apologized. Really apologized. He told her everything about Lisa. How she'd spent years manipulating Marcus, weaponizing his love for her, convincing him that poisoning Darius was the only way they could be together. How the plan had been for Marcus to take command afterward, with Lisa as his second, essentially giving her the control she'd always craved. How Marcus had saved Darius at the last second because he couldn't go through with murder, even for love. "He died protecting me," Darius said, his voice thick with grief. "And I never knew the truth. I had him executed thinking he'd betrayed me for ambition, when really he'd saved me from the person who actually wanted me dead." Mira took his hand. They talked long into the night about betrayal and forgiveness, about the complicated nature of love and loyalty. And Mira began to understand. Darius had been Lisa's victim too. Isolated, traumatized, turned against the one person who genuinely tried to protect him at the end. It didn't excuse what he'd done to her, but it helped her understand why. As winter gave way to early spring, something shifted. Mira would catch Darius watching her in corridors, his expression full of longing. When she smiled at him, he'd smile back, freely, fully, like she was the only thing that mattered. The soul bond, which had been quiet and aching, began to roar to life again. Mira found herself seeking him out, drawn to his presence like a compass finding north. His consistent actions, his patience, his respect for her boundaries, they were slowly rebuilding what his betrayal had broken. One evening in the library, as they sat close over a book about ancient battle tactics, Mira realized she'd forgiven him. Not because he'd proven himself enough, though he had, but because she chose to trust him again. That's what love was, choosing trust despite the risk. So when one night, looking more handsome than she'd ever seen him in formal dress uniform, he said, "Mira, you brought me back to life. You showed me what real strength looks like, the courage to trust again, to be vulnerable, to let someone in." He took her hands in his. "You forgave me when I didn't deserve it. You stayed when you had every right to leave. Will you do me the honor of becoming my wife? My soulbound?" A tear slid down Mira's cheek and she replied, "I thought you'd never ask." Darius lifted her off her feet and kissed her, spinning her around in the empty library. And when they finally broke apart, breathless and laughing, Mira touched his face gently. I love you, she whispered. Not despite your flaws but including them. All of you. And I love you, Darius replied, his voice rough with emotion. I love you and I trust you. Always. Under the full moon, in the fortress courtyard filled with the first blooms of spring, they held each other. Two broken people who'd found their way back to wholeness together. Mira knew, with the certainty that only a soul bond could bring, that this time it would last. Because they'd chosen each other, not just once but again and again through doubt and fear and pain. And that choice, renewed daily, was stronger than any test. The end.